Hello again, my loves. Tonight unfolds the story of a woman whose heart had already been fractured long before her body ever was. A nurse whose quiet devotion stretched far past duty, and a kind of love that didn't begin gently, but proved it could survive reality. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from time alone, but from the hands that refuse to let you fall. The first sensation was rain filling my mouth, metallic with blood when I tried to breathe, then light, violent and sudden, headlights slicing through darkness like a blade. A shout followed, then impact, as if the world itself had decided to strike twice. One moment I was on my bike, shoulders hunched, backpack biting into me as I pushed through a storm sharp enough to sting my skin. The next, my front wheels slipped on a thin, treacherous film of oil spread across the crosswalk. A delivery van braked too late. The collision came sideways, brutal enough that I stopped feeling human for a second. Just weight, just force. Metal twisted, bone met pavement. A scream tore free, unrecognizable as my own. Then pain, blinding, absolute, burned everything else away. When sight returned, I was on the ground, curled instinctively around a leg that no longer felt like it belonged to me. Rain had soaked through everything, plastering my hair across my face. My bike lay mangled beneath the van, its front wheels spinning uselessly in the downpour. Someone knelt beside me, voice urgent, repeating instructions I couldn't obey. Not that I wanted to move, but when I tried, pain erupted from hip and ankle in the same breath, dragging darkness in at the edges of my vision. A stranger hovered above me, their face blurred, voice insistent. I couldn't focus on them. My thoughts snagged on something absurd yet certain. I was late, not for work. I had already left work. Late for a version of life where things were supposed to finally ease. Then everything dissolved into sirens. When I woke again, the world had narrowed into white light and relentless pain. My heart pounded so violently it seemed to amplify every injury. The ceiling above me was harsh and distant. My tongue felt thick. Tubes, pressure, weight. My body was no longer mine to command. Breathing itself felt like dragging air through fire, then a voice cut through it. Low, steady, close. Not loud, not falsely comforting, just certain. I turned my head and saw her. She stood beside the bed in navy scrubs, composed in a way that felt deliberate. One hand rested on the rail, the other still holding a cuff she'd likely just removed. Her dark hair was braided neatly, untouched by the chaos of a long shift. Her face carried intelligence sharpened by restraint, softened only by choice. And her eyes, dark, attentive, didn't miss anything. They held everything back. Panic surged again. My leg. "It's there," she said, the faintest shift at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. "You still have it." I stared at her, trying to piece together reality. "You were hit. You're in St. Bridget's trauma step down. No brain bleed. Concussion, 2 cracked ribs, a severe ankle fracture, and a hairline pelvic fracture. Surgery's done. It went well." A pause, then quieter, steadier. "You're safe." Safe, the word landed strangely, like something I hadn't heard properly in years. Not since loss hollowed out my home. Not since love had been twisted into obligation and absence. Not since resilience had become a polite way of saying expendable. My gaze drifted back to the ceiling, eyes stinging. "That sounds expensive." This time, her mouth did lift slightly. "That concern can wait until you're less medicated." "I'm not." She glanced at the monitor, then back at me. "You asked about your bicycle 4 times, memory flickered weakly." "Was it okay?" Ren, the way she said my name stilled something in me. She must have read it off the wristband, but it didn't sound clinical. It sounded careful, deliberate. Like holding something fragile without breaking it. "Your bike didn't make it," she said. "You did." A broken laugh slipped out, tangled with something dangerously close to a sob. "There you are," she murmured, as if she had been waiting for exactly that crack. My throat tightened. "Will I walk?" "Yes." No hesitation, no softness meant to cushion doubt, just certainty. Something inside my chest loosened enough to let me breathe. "Are you allowed to promise that?" "I'm allowed to tell you what the orthopedic team expects," she replied. "And what I expect is that you'll be stubborn, difficult, sarcastic, and relentless in physical therapy. You've known me for seconds. 19. She adjusted the blanket with efficient precision. "You apologized to an orderly while throwing up on him." Horror flared so sharply it almost distracted from everything else. "I did not, you did. He was moved." "Oh my, not emotionally," she added deadpan. "Physically, toward the sink." I stared at her, stunned. Then laughter broke through despite the pain, sharp and immediate. It hurt, pulling a gasp from me, and her hand came to rest lightly over the blanket near my shin. Careful. The touch wasn't forceful, just present, warm even through layers of fabric, and in that simple gesture, something instinctive settled. She was the kind of person people listened to when they were afraid. "What's your name?" I asked. Adair Rowe. Her badge caught the light briefly. RN, it fit her, clean, precise, impossible to improve. "I'm glad you're here," I said before I could stop myself. Something flickered across her expression. Quick, human, gone. "I'm glad you're awake." Time blurred after that. Pain came in tides. So did people, voices explaining injuries, hands checking dressings, footsteps passing the doorway. Machines beeped. Rain tapped insistently against the window. But every time fear rose high enough to swallow me, she was there, not always directly beside me. Sometimes just outside, charting quietly. Sometimes speaking gently to another patient down the hall. Sometimes appearing before I could even ask for something. Ice chips, a shifted pillow, relief in small, precise increments. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said once, adjusting my position as pain threatened to spill over. "I'm not pretending." A faint, unimpressed sound. That was not convincing. The nights stretched long. One of them broke open with a dream that felt too real. Back in the street, rain choking me, my body pinned, no one coming. I woke already crying, panic clawing through me before logic could catch up. The monitor betrayed me with sharp, relentless beeping. "Ren," her voice again, closer, firmer this time. "Look at me." The room tilted. Pain sharpened under the panic. Breath fractured, then she was there, crouched level with me, exhaustion shadowing her features but not touching her focus. "You're not there," she said. "You're here." Her words anchored the space around me. Hospital room, 4th floor, harsh lights, an unimpressed plant in the hallway. Something almost like a laugh broke through the chaos. "That's it," she murmured. "Stay with me." She guided me through it piece by piece. What I could see, what I could feel, her voice steady, unyielding. At some point, I realized her fingers had wrapped lightly around my wrist, not restraining. Grounding, her touch was cool, deliberate, constant. By the time the panic ebbed, exhaustion replaced it. The kind that leaves nothing but quiet in its wake. And when the tears came then, they were softer. Not breaking, just releasing. Adair passed me a box of tissues without a word. I pressed one to my face, turning away. Heat rising in my chest at the simple fact of being seen like this. She spoke evenly, as if naming something ordinary. "Nightmares follow trauma. They settle in whether you invite them or not." "I know," I managed, my voice thin with something I didn't want to admit. I just didn't want to become one of those tragic, interesting cases people talk about. Her reply came without hesitation. "Too late. You already stand out." I tried to glare at her, but it came out weak and unconvincing. "You're terrible at comforting people." "I'm very good at it," she said calmly. "I just have standards for delivery." Despite everything, a small smile broke through. She adjusted the line at my arm, dimmed the harsh light, and turned toward the door, exactly when she should have left. There were other patients, other rooms, entire lives depending on her attention. But something inside me cracked open before I could stop it. "Could you stay, just for a minute?" The words felt humiliating even as they left me. Not a demand, not a plea for something impossible, just a small, fragile request. She paused, then came back without a trace of reluctance. The chair scraped softly as she pulled it closer and sat. "A minute," she said. It felt like the kindest lie I'd ever been given. Because when I woke again, dawn had already begun to soften the edges of the room. The chair was empty, but a warm blanket had been tucked carefully around my feet, and the pillow under my arm had been adjusted with quiet precision. Someone had thought about me while I slept. The intimacy of that settled deep, almost undoing me. Morning made everything sharper. Needing help wasn't abstract anymore. It was constant. Help to sit, to stand, to move, to breathe through pain without breaking apart. Even learning to use a walker became an ordeal under the cheerful insistence of the physical therapist, Joe, whose energy felt almost aggressive before breakfast. "You're doing great," he said brightly. "I feel like a haunted coat rack. Better than yesterday. Yesterday I was unconscious." "Exactly. Progress." Adair stood off to the side, watching, a small cup of medication in her hand. Her expression revealed nothing, yet somehow never made me feel invisible. When my arms began to shake under my weight and humiliation surged hot enough to sting my eyes, she stepped forward without announcement. Her hand rested lightly at my waist, not gripping, just present. "Don't look down," she said. "Look where you're going. I'm heading straight into disgrace. You're going 6 feet to that chair." A subtle pressure guided me when I wavered. Heat flickered through me, unexpected, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. It felt absurd, this spark of awareness in a place that smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. I resented it, even as I understood it. Pain, fear, sleeplessness. Of course my mind would cling to the one steady presence in the room. If my best friend Beck were here, she'd already be warning me not to confuse survival with something softer. Adair helped me sit, my arms trembling from the effort. "There," she said. "I'm trying not to make this your problem. This is my job. I mean the pathetic part." Something shifted then, subtle but unmistakable. She set the medication down and lowered herself slightly, so I had no choice but to meet her gaze. Needing help when you're hurt isn't pathetic. It feels like it. I know what it feels like. Her voice stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it now. That doesn't make it true. I had no response for that. "Take these," she added, softer again. "Then you can criticize the hospital coffee properly. Is it that bad?" "It's a war crime." That earned a real laugh. I swallowed the pills. Later, Beck arrived like a storm contained in human form, arms full of things I hadn't realized I needed. Lip balm, socks, dry shampoo, my sketchbook, even my favorite gum. She took one look at me and burst into tears before launching into a string of affectionate insults. Then she noticed Adair at the door. "Oh," Beck said, instantly alert. Adair gave a small nod. "She managed 6 feet with the walker." "Did she?" Beck turned to me, wounded. "Showing off without me. I nearly died doing it. Still counts." Adair's gaze shifted briefly to the bag. "No flowers, everything else is fine." "You must be Adair," Beck said, far too pleased. Heat rushed to my face. "I have not said anything strange about her. You said her voice could lower your blood pressure on contact." I was concussed. Adair didn't seem embarrassed in the slightest. "Efficient," she said. Beck grinned. "Oh, she's dangerous." "Beck," I hissed. "What?" "I'm being supportive. Supportive in the way chaos supports gravity." Adair finished checking my IV, then addressed Beck with quiet authority. 5 minutes if she gets overstimulated. "I never." Beck knocked over my water mid-sentence. Adair caught it before it hit the floor. Effortless. After she left, Beck leaned close. "You are in serious trouble." "I am not. Your pupils just betrayed you. She's doing her job." I shut my eyes. "Tell me the museum called." They did. "Your manager said to focus on recovery, then asked if you'd answer emails about the winter exhibit." "That sounds like her." "I told her if she bothered you again, I'd send a live goose." "You don't know where to get a goose." "I have access to both canals and the internet." I laughed, then immediately regretted it, clutching my ribs. Beck's expression softened as she steadied me. "I've got you," she said. The words should have settled easily. Instead, they pressed against old bruises left by promises that hadn't held. Her voice gentled. "Nothing is getting rid of me. Not a van, not work, not anything." The breath that left me wavered dangerously close to tears again. "You sound like a greeting card written by a criminal, and you love me for it." I did. But when evening returned and the room dimmed, pain settling in like something alive and patient, it wasn't comfort that my body listened for first. It was her footsteps in the corridor. By the end of the week, I could recognize them without seeing her. That familiarity should have unsettled me more than it did. The ward moved in its own patterns. The quiet rush of stretchers, the clatter of trays, the eccentric rituals of other patients, the half-light that never quite became night. And within all of it, Adair became something I couldn't quite explain, a constant. A habit I hadn't meant to form. She worked long stretches, vanished briefly, then returned carrying the faint traces of rain, coffee, and the cold outside. As if she belonged partly to the world beyond the hospital, and partly to the space where I was slowly, painfully learning how to stand again. She learned the small, specific things about me with unsettling ease. Orange gelatin stayed untouched, but lemon ice disappeared. When my right hand cramped from gripping the bed rail too long, a rolled washcloth appeared in my palm before I could even register the pain. She spoke to me as if my dignity never left the room, even in the moments when I needed help with the most basic, humbling tasks. Especially then, one morning, a surgical resident swept in, brisk and distracted, speaking over me rather than to me. He used the word non-compliant like a label he could stick on my chart and move on. Before I could shrink under it, Adair corrected him so smoothly it almost sounded like agreement. "She isn't non-compliant," she said, scanning my chart while he tried to reclaim authority. "She's in pain, sleep-deprived and trying not to vomit. Different situation." He blinked, recalibrating. Right. If I'd been capable of kneeling, I might have proposed on the spot. Instead, I waited until he left and murmured, "You're my favorite person today." One hopes that improves by tomorrow, she said, adjusting the blanket. It won't. Her fingers paused for just a fraction of a second. Dangerous thing to tell someone who controls your medication schedule. I knew there'd be a catch. Most of our conversations stayed light, quick, dry, edged with something I refused to look at too closely. It was easier that way, safer. But one evening, I made the mistake of asking the time. Almost 9, she said. I frowned. Weren't you off at 7? She looked up slowly. I hadn't meant to say it. Or maybe I had. Pain and medication had worn my restraint thin. You've been tracking my schedule, she said. Heat climbed my neck. That sounded worse out loud. Sorry. Ignore me. I'm covering an extra hour. Oh, the word came out too quickly, too small. The realization settled quietly, but it stayed. She had stayed. For me, I said before I could stop myself. That made her still. The room seemed to tighten around us, every sound suddenly too loud. My pulse louder still. She slipped her penlight into her pocket with careful precision. You had a difficult night, she said. My name softer in her voice now. I wanted to make sure your pain was managed after therapy. It was a reasonable answer. It wasn't the only one. Okay. She studied me for a moment. Does that bother you? No, I said too fast. Then, because exhaustion stripped away the habits I usually hid behind, I added, it scares me a little. Her expression shifted gentler, almost the way she looked when she thought I wasn't awake. Why? The truth rose up, sharp and dangerous, but I swallowed it down. Instead of everything I feared, everything I expected to lose, I gave her the version I could survive, saying, I don't know what to do with kindness that precise. The silence that followed was soft, almost protective. It wrapped around the moment instead of breaking it. She pulled the chair closer and sat, composed as ever except for the simple fact that she hadn't left. Then let it be enough, she said quietly. You don't have to turn it into anything else tonight. My throat tightened. How are you real? Lack of sleep, she replied dryly. I'm probably a very convincing hallucination. Despite the ache behind my eyes, I smiled. Her gaze lingered a beat longer than it should have before shifting to the sketchbook resting on my tray. You draw. You noticed. You covered the brand name with tape. It was ugly. That tracks. A quiet laugh slipped out of me. I work at the Ashdown Museum. Exhibit fabrication. Design. Whatever disaster they decide I'm suited for that week. The winter installation, she said. The glass birds. I blinked. You've seen it. I went on my day off. The lighting was good. A strange, bright pride flickered through me. I did that. I thought so. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. But it did. How? The placement was precise, she said. Unforgiving in a good way. I stared at her. That might be the best compliment I've ever received. A faint, almost smile touched her mouth. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. I think my manager finds me useful in emergencies and invisible the rest of the time. Her expression flattened slightly. That sounds short-sighted. It's the politest word you could use. It's the one I can use while wearing this badge. Coward, professional. When she finally stood to leave, she angled the lamp so its light fell on my sketchbook instead of my eyes. A small adjustment, almost nothing, unless you were paying attention. Unless you needed someone to. After she left, I opened to a blank page and drew her hand from memory. Not her face. That felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to admit existed. Just her hand. Long fingers, clean nails, the quiet strength in the knuckles, the faint line of a vein beneath the skin. A hand that knew how to steady, to support, to hold without taking more than necessary. I kept drawing until the lines blurred. The next morning, she found me unraveling over something as simple as shampoo. Not the object itself, but what it carried with it. The scent of my apartment, my small routines, the life I'd been pulled out of without warning. It hit all at once, sharp and aching. She stepped in, took one look at my face, and closed the door behind her. What happened? I shook my head, embarrassed. It's stupid. Those are usually the hardest things. A helpless laugh escaped me. That's annoyingly accurate. Occupational hazard. She waited, not pushing, just leaving space for whatever I chose to say. I hated that kind of patience. Not because it pressured me, but because it didn't. It smells like my bathroom, I admitted finally, holding up the bottle, already aware of how ridiculous it sounded. Her expression softened instantly. I understand. It's not about the shampoo. I know. My voice shook. It's about not being able to go home. About needing instructions just to exist alone. She exhaled quietly. That's a very reasonable thing to hate. I looked up at her. You don't say things just to make people feel better. I say them because they're true. I remember. I remembered everything. She crossed the room, hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then held out her hand. Come on. Where? 3 steps to the chair so they can change your bed. I'll help. I feel awful. You're healing. That's different. I placed my hand in hers. It shouldn't have felt like anything new. She had touched me countless times already in the course of care. But this was different. Palm to palm, my fingers curling instinctively around hers, something shifted. It felt too close to something unnamed, something I wasn't ready to face. I almost pulled away. Her grip adjusted, gentle, not holding me in place, just steadying. Easy, she murmured. Lean on me. So I did, because I had no choice, because I needed to. Because somewhere along the way, I had learned exactly how much strength lived in the difference between being pitied and being held with care. By the time I reached the chair, breath unsteady and limbs trembling, her hand had moved to my waist again. Light, warm, certain, keeping me upright without ever making me feel small. Her face hovered close enough for detail to sharpen. One faint freckle near her left temple, a narrow vertical scar tucked into the edge of her eyebrow. How did you get that? Slipped out before I could stop it. Her gaze flicked up, cool and unreadable. Questioning your nurse now? I'm bored, I said. I've taken up bad habits. A brief pause, then simply, a tree. I blinked. A tree gave you that scar? I was 8. It disagreed with how I climbed. The image caught me off guard enough to laugh, and under her steady attention the sound softened into something quieter, warmer. You climb trees. I contain multitudes. The moment snapped apart when the orderly walked in, reality reassembling itself into routine. Still, I carried that version of her with me all day. 8 years old, stubborn enough to argue with gravity, already the kind of person who left marks on the world even when the world struck first. 2 days later, I met Mrs. Finch in the rehabilitation gym, a place where fluorescent lights were merciless, and dignity seemed to dissolve somewhere between resistance bands and parallel bars. She was 73, recovering from a hip replacement, and treated anyone under 50 with cheerful disdain. Her lilac lipstick was immaculate, her opinions sharper. That nurse is in love with you, she announced the first time Adair stepped in to check my pain levels before therapy. I nearly walked straight into a wall. She is not, I muttered, mortified. Mrs. Finch looked at me as if I'd failed a basic intelligence test. Then she should be. She watches you like she's guarding something valuable. It's her job to watch patients. I've had 6 surgeries, she said dismissively. I know the difference between professionalism and interest. Please never use that tone again in my presence. Young people are fragile. Jo, my physical therapist, offered no rescue, only enthusiasm as she pushed me through exercises until my arms trembled. By then, I could manage the walker without feeling like I might collapse at any second. I still couldn't put weight on my right ankle, still woke at night with echoes of the crash inside my bones. But the worst helplessness had shifted into effort. And effort, however painful, felt like something I could claim. It also meant more time, under Adair's careful supervision. There was something quietly devastating about being guided back into movement by someone you were trying very hard not to want. The first time she stepped in behind me as I struggled toward the rehab bench, awareness sharpened painfully. Your walker's drifting, she said. My entire existence is drifting. That too. One hand steadied the belt at my waist. The other hovered near my elbow. Slow down. I am moving at the speed of gossip. You'd be surprised how fast that travels. Mrs. Finch cackled from across the room. I like her. Everyone does, I muttered. Adair's gaze landed on me then, direct enough to warm my throat. Do they? I should have deflected, turned it into something lighter. Instead I said, yes. The word hung there longer than it should have. She held my gaze for a moment that stretched just past safe, then helped me lower into the chair. After that, the details began to accumulate, small and precise. The way she pushed a loose strand of hair back with her wrist when her hands were occupied. The way her voice softened for frightened patients. Not out of condescension, but because she met them exactly where they were. The way she leaned against door frames like she had forgotten she was tired, then straightened instantly when someone needed her. I noticed everything. The coffee she never finished while it was still hot. The faint irritation at certain sounds in the corridor. The rare, fleeting crease in her cheek when she was truly amused, gone almost as soon as it appeared. I watched too closely, I knew that. She saw too much of me in return. When my father finally called, I nearly threw the hospital phone against the wall. 6 days had passed since the accident. 6 days of silence, followed by a careful, Distant voice checking in like he was asking about the weather. Your friend said you're okay, he said. She said I'm alive. Well, that's good. The words landed flat. Predictable, hollow. Were you aiming for something meaningful? I asked, a sigh, mild irritation as if I were the difficult one. Hospitals aren't easy for me. Grief isn't easy for you, I thought. Emotion isn't easy. I have always been the inconvenient part of that. I can visit when you're home, he added, when I looked less broken, less urgent. We'll see, I said, and ended the call before he could soften it into something easier to ignore. The conversation lasted minutes. The damage lasted longer. My hands were still shaking when Adair walked in, balancing a tray with a cup of soup. One glance at my face was enough. Bad call. Is it that obvious? Yes, wonderful. She set the tray down. Who was it, my father? Understanding flickered across her expression, brief, contained. She pulled the chair closer and sat. What do you want? She asked. Sympathy, practical advice, or for me to say he sounds emotionally unequipped. A surprised laugh broke out of me. All three feels ambitious. Her tone stayed dry, but it unraveled something in me more effectively than pity could have. My mother died when I was 17, I said slowly. He didn't fall apart loudly, he just folded. Like something set aside and forgotten. He still functions, pays bills, sends reminders, but anything real just never arrives. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush to fill the space. She simply listened, steady and present. I got good at not needing much, I went on. It seemed easier than being disappointed. Her gaze dropped briefly to my hands gripping the blanket. And now you have to need things. I let out a humorless breath. I hate that you make it sound reasonable. It is. Something tightened in my throat. My ex used to say I only relaxed when I was useful. Her expression sharpened. That sounds exhausting. She also said if I stopped proving I was worth keeping, no one would want the inconvenient parts. The air shifted, colder. It took a second to recognize the change in her. Anger, controlled and precise. She said that to you. It wasn't great, I said lightly. I missed some warning signs. She said that to you, she repeated quieter. I looked at her. Why are you more upset than I am? Because you might have learned to accept being treated badly. The words landed softly, but they stayed. When I opened my eyes again, her expression had gentled, though something firm remained underneath. For what it's worth, she said, voice quieter now. The inconvenient parts are usually the most real. No one had ever said something I needed with that kind of precision. Not softened, not wrapped in advice or optimism, not followed by an expectation that I recover quickly enough to make it easier for everyone else. It landed cleanly, and the relief of it almost hurt. Adair, I said. She tilted her head slightly. Yes, I think you're dangerous to me. Something flickered in her eyes. Because I brought you soup? Because you say things like that and act as if it's ordinary. For once, she didn't have a response ready. Her gaze dropped briefly to the tray, then returned to me. Eat before it gets cold. That's avoidance. That's competent nursing. I ate, not because I cared about the soup, but because she had asked in that quiet, steady way. And because without meaning to, I had started shaping my days around her approval. That realization unsettled me enough to try to pull back, not physically. Physically, I still depended on steady hands and careful instructions just to navigate a few steps. But emotionally, I began to edit myself. I spoke less honestly, asked fewer questions, kept my gaze shorter, filled gaps with humor instead of truth. She noticed before noon. You're quieter, she said, checking the dressing at my ankle. I'm cultivating mystery. No, she replied evenly. You're hiding. I stared down at my cast. Maybe I need a better hobby. You already have one. She secured the bandage with practiced care. Deflection. Rude. Consistent. I could have left it there. Instead, I pushed. You're not exactly open either. No, she agreed. That feels unfair. It is. It's also accurate. I watched her in profile as she worked, controlled, self-contained, composed in a way that didn't ask for attention and therefore drew it anyway. So what am I not supposed to ask? She paused. It was subtle, the kind of stillness most people would miss. I had learned to recognize those small shifts in her. You can ask anything, she said. That doesn't mean you'll answer. A faint breath left her. She finished securing the dressing, then straightened and met my eyes. No, there it was. Not harsh, not defensive. Just something old and carefully guarded. I didn't know what pushed me past that line. Maybe the accumulation of sleepless nights and shared silences. Maybe the way injury strips away the polished versions of restraint and leaves only what's real. Why do you stay late? I asked. For a heartbeat, Her expression gave nothing. Then it gave too much. You noticed that as well? Yes. She looked toward the window, where evening had begun to soften the sky. My younger brother died 3 years ago, she said. The words settled heavily between us. He wasn't ill. He fell during a storm. Wrong place, wrong moment. The kind of story people try to explain so it feels less random. Her mouth tightened slightly. I was on shift when they called. I missed it. All of it. The room went very still. When I got there. She stopped, then tried again, her voice steadier. Since then, I don't leave easily when someone feels unsafe. The words moved through me like cold water. Adair. She finally looked back at me, and the composure she usually wore had thinned into something older, more fragile. You asked? She said quietly. That's the answer. I'm sorry. She gave a small shake of her head. People say that because there's nothing else to offer. Is there anything from the inside? A pause. No, some days there's only endurance. I couldn't move toward her. Couldn't close the space without turning it into something complicated and physical. So I did the only thing I could. I held out my hand. It felt reckless in a way everything else between us hadn't. Not clinical, not necessary, just offered. She looked at it, then at me. You don't have to, I said softly. She stepped closer anyway and placed her hand in mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her skin was cool at first, then warmed slowly against mine. Her fingers stayed very still, as if stillness itself was holding everything together. I'm glad you told me, I said. Her lashes lowered briefly. I'm not. A faint smile touched me. That sounds right. It is. Her gaze dropped to where our hands were joined. She didn't pull away. But I'm not sorry. Before all of this, I might have believed romance belonged to grand gestures, city lights, certainty, the kind of moments built to be remembered. I would have been wrong. Sometimes it is this, a quiet confession at the edge of a hospital bed, a hand held just a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken settling into place between two people who didn't expect to find it there. After that, restraint became something tangible. It sharpened every small thing. The brush of fingers, the pauses in conversation, the quiet jokes that belonged only to us while the rest of the ward carried on. On my 10th day, she took me to the roof. Not secretly, not really. I was wrapped in blankets in a wheelchair, entirely visible, but it still felt like crossing a line. That space was meant for people who could walk freely, and I was still learning how to exist inside a body that required negotiation. It's cold, I whispered as she pushed me through the doors. It's fresh air, she said. Complain creatively, and I'll take you back. The city stretched out beneath a gray sky, rooftops slick with rain, chimneys breathing slow plumes into the air. The garden itself was small, planters, benches, a barrier near the helipad, but after days inside sealed rooms it felt expansive. I tilted my face upward, letting the cold settle into my lungs. She parked the chair near a planter of winter rosemary and sat across from me, her coat pulled close against the wind. Seeing her outside the uniform shifted something, made her seem less contained, more real. Better? She asked. Don't make me admit that. I'll cope. The air carried hints of rosemary and distant smoke. Sirens rose and faded somewhere below. Above us, the clouds thinned, letting pale light through. I used to come up here after difficult shifts, she said. You're not supposed to tell patients your hiding places. That assumes it's a habit. It definitely is. A faint smile touched her face. I turned to look at her, noticing the color in her cheeks from the cold, the way she seemed more unguarded outside the structured rhythm of the ward. What makes a shift bad? The usual, she said. Too many patients, not enough hands. Families who think raising their voices changes outcomes. Does it? No, they remain optimistic. I laughed, easier now than it had been days before. She leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on her knees. What about you? What about me? What did you do after bad days before this happened? I looked out over the edge of the roof. I walked home slowly, ate cereal for dinner, told myself I liked being alone. She absorbed that without judgment. Were you lonely? The question was direct, but it didn't feel intrusive. It felt precise. Yes, I said. The word felt like stepping into cold water, sharp, undeniable. Yes, I repeated softer. Often, she held my gaze, steady and unflinching, and something about that steadiness made it feel possible to keep going. I got good at being capable, I said. People rely on that. They admire it. It's easy to become useful instead of known. The wind tugged lightly at the edge of my blanket. I think I turned usefulness into something safe, I continued. Safer than hoping someone would stay when there wasn't anything to offer but myself. Adair reached out without thinking, and tucked the blanket more securely around my knees. Her fingers brushed my thigh through the wool, and every part of me stilled at once. "They should have chosen you anyway," she said. "No one had ever given me something so simple and so devastatingly exact." I swallowed, trying to steady myself. "You say things like that as if they don't cost you anything." Her eyes lifted to mine. "They don't cost nothing. Something shifted between us. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniable." I looked away first. "That sounds like something I'm meant to ignore." "Probably. Do you want me to?" The wind stirred the rosemary beside us, releasing its sharp, clean scent. "No," she said after a moment. "But wanting and wisdom don't always agree." A helpless smile broke through me. That might be the most attractive thing anyone's ever said to me while I'm wearing hospital socks. For the first time, her composure cracked. Not completely, just enough. A low, surprised laugh escaped her, lighting her face from within. I caught it, the brief crease in her cheek, and held on to it like proof of something rare. "Don't look so pleased," she said. "I feel like I've earned something." "You've earned 10 more minutes before I take you back inside." Cruel. When she wheeled me in again, my hands were cold, but my pulse was anything but steady. That night, my dreams were threaded with rosemary, dark eyes, and the echo of a laugh I hadn't expected to win from someone so carefully guarded. The next morning, Beck arrived carrying pastries she definitely wasn't supposed to bring and took one look at me before shaking her head. "No," I blinked. "No what?" "No to whatever expression that is." "What expression?" "The one that says your entire personality has been rearranged by a woman in scrubs." I nearly choked on my tea. "You need less imagination." "Interesting. Tell me everything." "There's nothing to tell." She turned the chair around and leaned on it, studying me. "I love you enough to be gentle, but I'm not blind. Does she like you?" I stared down at the blanket. "I don't know." "And you? What kind of question is that?" "The obvious kind," I groaned. "It doesn't matter. Those are different statements." "It matters because she's a nurse, and I'm currently held together by tape and bad decisions. I'm not turning her into something she's not just because I'm injured." Beck's expression softened. "You really think that's what's happening?" I wanted to say yes. It would have made everything simpler, reduced it to circumstance, proximity, the strange chemistry of vulnerability, but it wouldn't have been true. "No," I admitted quietly. "I think I like her because she sees me when I can't perform." Beck went still. "That's inconveniently honest." "I know. What if timing is part of it?" "Then it is," she said. "That doesn't make the rest of it unreal." I looked at her. "She isn't extraordinary because you're hurt," Beck added. "She's extraordinary because you light up every time she walks into the room and then pretend you don't." "I do not light up." "You absolutely do." I buried my face in the pillow, but her words stayed. So did the fear underneath them. Timing mattered. Circumstance mattered. Adair had met me at my worst hurt, unsteady, stripped of every defense I usually relied on. She knew the rhythms of my pain, the timing of my medication, the nights I woke up afraid. Of course something would grow in that kind of closeness. Entire forests could. I told myself that. Then that evening, she brushed my hair back from my forehead while checking my temperature, and every careful theory I had constructed collapsed instantly. The last week passed in increments that felt both tiny and monumental. A few more steps, a steadier turn, standing long enough to manage simple tasks that once required no thought, progress, measured in effort and small victories. She saw all of it. When I managed the practice stairs without stopping, she was waiting at the bottom, arms folded, her expression composed but unmistakably proud. "Showing off," she said. "I thought you doubted me." Not for a second. The answer came too quickly to be casual. I felt it settle somewhere deeper than the bruises. That afternoon, a delivery arrived. An orchid from Simone, accompanied by a card that managed to sound light while carrying something sharp underneath. I stared at it until irritation blurred into something heavier. She had always known how to make cruelty sound harmless. When Adair came in and saw me glaring at it, she read the card in a single glance. "She sent flowers to remind you you're inconvenient," she said. The accuracy startled a laugh out of me. "Yes, she's not welcome in your recovery." "You can do that. I can do many things. I believe that." Her gaze lingered. "Do you want them gone?" It shouldn't have mattered how she asked. It did. Yes, she picked up the arrangement and the card without another word. "Adair." She paused. "Thank you." Something softened in her expression. "I'd remove an entire greenhouse if needed." When she returned, she found me laughing weakly into my hands. "That bad?" "Worse." I think I've developed a new problem. Only one, she said lightly, adjusting the IV that was due to come out the next day. You keep saying things like that. Her hand paused. Like what? I almost told her. Instead, I retreated. Like you're funnier than you look. The caution vanished, replaced by dry amusement. Recovered quickly, that's your problem. The day before discharge, rain settled over everything. Soft, steady, turning the world outside into blurred silver. My IV was gone. The pain was manageable if I respected its limits. I had learned how to move again, how to balance, how to manage the awkward choreography of recovery. I had everything I needed to leave. I should have felt ready. Instead, something uneasy settled in my chest. Home meant independence, but also quiet. No footsteps in the hallway, no immediate help, no one watching for the small signs that something wasn't right. And no her. I had always known that part. Knowing it and feeling it were entirely different things. She found me by the window, staring out at the rain. You're frowning at the weather, she said. I'm considering a quieter life elsewhere. That would suit you. You're making this difficult. That hasn't been listed as a symptom. It should be. She stepped closer, close enough that the space between us felt deliberate. Discharge tomorrow, she said. I nodded. How does that feel? Like I should say I'm ready, I admitted. Instead, it feels like being asked to ride something I've already crashed. Her mouth curved slightly. That's vivid. I try. You complain well. I smiled, but it didn't hold. What if I can't do it? She turned fully toward me. You can, she said. I mean at home. I know what you mean. The room seemed smaller, quieter. I'm scared, I said, finally letting it be true. She didn't flinch from the truth of it. She let it land exactly as it was. A quiet agreement, steady and unsoftened. Some of it would be difficult. The way people looked, the strange negotiations of sleep, the awkward choreography of showers, the learning curve of accepting help without apologizing for existing. I joked about my habit of apologizing too often, and she adjusted the target lower with dry precision, like she always did. A small laugh slipped out of me, thin but real. Her expression eased, just a fraction. Difficult didn't mean impossible. That distinction settled into me slowly, like warmth returning to cold hands. I wouldn't be doing it alone, not entirely. Beaks had already threatened to occupy my apartment like a determined storm system. My father had offered something conditional, something distant, something that required me to be easier to look at first. She didn't like that. I saw it in the subtle tightening of her jaw. Care, she made clear, was not something I needed to earn by becoming more convenient. That struck deeper than the injury ever had. I turned away because my eyes burned too quickly, too openly. I didn't understand how she kept finding the exact words that broke something open in me. Words that made me want to either fall apart or do something reckless and irreversible. This time, I chose reckless. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Kiss. It hung there between us, sharp and alive. I felt the heat rise to my face instantly, the urge to take it back clawing at my throat. She didn't rescue me, didn't pretend she hadn't heard. She held still, entirely present with it. My apology came too fast, clumsy and useless. She stopped that just as firmly. Honesty didn't require apology, even when it complicated everything. So I faced her fully, bracing myself for distance, for the clean boundary snapping back into place. But what I saw wasn't distance. It was restraint. Controlled, deliberate, and costing her something. Her composure was intact, but I could see the strain beneath it, the careful stillness, the attention to breathing that gave her away. I pushed anyway, because something in me refused to leave this unfinished. I needed the truth more than I needed safety. The answer came without hesitation, not imagined. Not one-sided, real. It hit like lightning, fast and undeniable. She closed her eyes briefly, then gathered herself again, pulling the line back into place with visible effort. She reminded me of what we were, what this space demanded. She was still my nurse, still responsible, still bound by something larger than either of us. And here, in this place, it went no further, not nowhere, just not here. That distinction changed everything. It lit something reckless and bright inside me, something dangerously close to hope. I held on to it carefully, like it might burn if I gripped too tight. When she told me to sit, I obeyed, not just because my body required it, but because hers sounded less steady than usual too. That night stretched endlessly. Sleep came in fragments, if at all. The moment replayed again and again, every glance, every breath, every word etched too clearly to ignore. By morning, I half convinced myself I had imagined it. Then she came in and avoided my eyes with surgical precision, and the truth settled back into place. Discharge day moved with chaotic efficiency. Papers appeared. Instructions stacked up faster than I could process them. My body became a checklist. My future reduced to schedules, medications, cautions. Beaks arrived like a force of nature, all energy and certainty. Already taking control of logistics I didn't have the strength to manage. Joe came with final instructions. Mrs. Finch shouted unsolicited life advice across the ward like a prophet of romantic regret. And through all of it, I kept waiting. She didn't come. By the time the wheelchair arrived to take me out, something tight and raw had formed in my chest. It made no sense to expect anything. She had a job, a life, other patients. Still, the absence felt louder than it should have. Then the orderly stopped. She was there, near the station, holding a folder, as if the entire morning had rearranged itself just enough to allow this one moment. She stepped in, calm as ever, and dismissed the orderly with quiet authority. Beaks, with impeccable timing, removed herself from the immediate radius in a way that was both obvious and generous. Up close, the strain showed, the cost of everything unspoken. She handed me the discharge papers. Our fingers brushed, nothing more, but it carried weight far beyond the contact. Gratitude felt too small for what I meant, for the nights, the steadiness, the way she had seen me without asking me to perform. She checked what mattered, whether I had support, whether I would be safe. I told her what I could. Then I said what I couldn't leave unsaid. She wasn't in the paperwork. There was no section for the person who made survival feel possible. That landed somewhere deep. I saw it, so I took one more step, fragile and uncertain, and asked for something beyond this place. Not as a patient, not as a responsibility, as myself. She didn't answer immediately. She weighed it carefully, like everything she did. After today, she wouldn't be responsible for me anymore. That mattered. And if, after time had passed, after I had learned how to exist outside these walls again, I still wanted to know her, there was a way. She pointed me to the folder. At first it sounded formal, almost disappointing. A professional channel. A safe distance, then I understood. Inside, tucked quietly behind the official papers, was something not official at all. A number. No name. Just intent, written clearly enough to be undeniable. When I looked up, she was composed again, but only just. We played along with the fiction of professionalism, both of us aware of what sat between the lines. I held that small piece of paper like it mattered more than anything else I owned. And when I asked the question that had been building from the beginning, the answer came steady and certain. Yes. Not conditional. Not hesitant. Just yes. That single word carried me through everything that followed. The awkward exit, the careful descent into Beaks's car, the exhausting climb back into my own apartment. The strange, disorienting return to a life that felt both familiar and completely altered. That night, I placed the paper beneath my pillow like something protective, and then I waited. Days passed without reaching for it. Not because it didn't matter, but because reality demanded attention first. Healing wasn't poetic. It was slow, frustrating, and unglamorous. The apartment felt smaller than I remembered. Every task required effort. Stairs became obstacles. Showers became strategies. Time blurred under medication and fatigue. Nights were the hardest. Every sound felt sharp. Every shadow held memory. Every dream dragged me back to headlights and rain and impact. And through all of it, the number stayed where I had put it, waiting. Her hand moved without thinking, drawing the blanket tighter around my legs. The brush of her fingers through the wool sent a quiet shock through me, stilling everything. She said I should have been chosen regardless, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. No one had ever handed me something so direct, so devastating in its clarity. I swallowed, struggling to steady myself, telling her she spoke as though it cost her nothing. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and there was weight in them when she answered that it did cost something. Something shifted in the air between us, subtle but undeniable. I looked away first, pretending it hadn't landed as deeply as it had. It felt like the kind of moment I should ignore, tuck away, act as though I hadn't heard. When I asked if she wanted me to pretend, the pause stretched long enough to fill with the scent of rosemary carried on the wind. When she finally answered, she admitted she didn't want that, though wanting and wisdom rarely moved in step. I smiled, helpless against her honesty, teasing lightly just to keep my footing, and for once her composure cracked. The sound of her laughter was low and unguarded, lighting her face in a way I hadn't seen before. That fleeting crease in her cheek appeared again, and I felt absurdly victorious for having drawn it out. She gave me 10 more minutes before taking me back inside. It felt like a reward. When we returned, the cold lingered in my hands, but my pulse stayed warm and restless. That night, I carried her laughter into sleep, along with the scent of rosemary and the image of her looking at me like that. Morning brought beaks with contraband pastries, and a knowing look that cut straight through me. She read my face in an instant and refused to let me hide behind denial. I tried anyway, insisting there was nothing to tell, but she saw through it easily. When she asked if I liked her, I deflected, then stumbled over the truth. It mattered, I said, because of the circumstances, because I was injured, because it would be easy to mistake dependence for something else. Beaks didn't let me off that easily. She asked if I truly believed that was all it was. I wanted to say yes, to make it simple, but the answer refused to cooperate. I admitted quietly that it was more than that I liked her because she saw me without the usual performances, without the effort I used to make myself acceptable. Beaks called it real in a way that annoyed her, which meant it mattered. She reminded me that timing might play a role, but it didn't erase what was genuine. I tried to argue, to reduce it, but she only pointed out how obvious I was every time her name came up. I denied it. She insisted I lit up. I buried my face in the pillow, but her words stayed with me, along with the uneasy truth beneath them. I told myself it was situational, that intimacy could grow quickly under those conditions, that proximity and vulnerability could blur lines. I tried to believe it. Then later, when Adair brushed my hair back from my forehead with quiet care, every careful theory I had constructed collapsed instantly. The last week blurred into effort and progress, each small victory feeling enormous. I learned how to move again, step by step, reclaiming pieces of independence that once seemed trivial. She was there for all of it. When I finally managed the stairs without breaking down, she stood waiting at the bottom, arms folded, her pride unmistakable despite her composed expression. She called me a show-off, but the warmth beneath it stayed with me. Then the orchid arrived, sharp and unwelcome, carrying a message that felt like a familiar kind of cruelty disguised as humor. I stared at it, anger rising quietly. When she came in and read the card, she understood it immediately, translating its tone with unsettling accuracy. Her response cut through the tension, making me laugh despite myself. When she asked if I wanted it gone, the simple act of asking mattered more than it should have. I said yes, and she removed it without hesitation. When she returned, I was still shaken by how much her presence affected me. I tried to joke about it, deflect again, but the truth hovered too close. The next day, rain softened everything outside the windows and Discharge loomed closer. I should have felt relieved, ready to leave, but instead there was a heaviness in me I couldn't ignore. Home meant independence, but it also meant losing the constant presence that had quietly become essential. She found me staring out at the rain and stood beside me, close enough that the space between us felt deliberate. When she told me I didn't have to make myself easier to deserve care, it hit harder than anything else she'd said. It settled deep, leaving me raw and unsteady. I tried to hide it, to turn it into something lighter, but the moment slipped and I said too much. The word lingered between us, impossible to take back. She didn't rescue me from it. She didn't pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, she met it head-on, steady and unflinching. When I asked her to tell me it was all in my head, her answer came quietly but without hesitation. It wasn't. That single word changed everything. It moved through me like something electric, impossible to ignore. She pulled herself back afterward, drawing clear lines where they had to exist, reminding me of where we stood and what couldn't happen there. But she left a door open, just enough to let hope slip through. That hope stayed with me, fragile and overwhelming, carrying me through the final hours before discharge. When I thought I wouldn't see her again before leaving, disappointment settled heavily in my chest. Then she appeared, as if the moment had been arranged, standing in the middle of that ordinary morning like something extraordinary. She handed me my discharge notes, our fingers brushing briefly, and it felt like more than it should have. I thanked her, knowing the words were far too small for everything I meant. She asked about my support at home, grounding the moment in something practical, but her eyes held something deeper. When I asked about seeing her again outside all of this, she didn't answer immediately. The pause stretched, careful and deliberate. Then she told me that after I left, she wouldn't be part of my care anymore. The air shifted. Her hand rested near mine, not touching, but close enough to matter. She told me that if after everything I still wanted to know her, there was a way. At first it sounded like distance, like a polite boundary. Then I saw the meaning behind it, the quiet intention. Inside the folder was a number, written plainly, waiting. When I looked back at her, her composure had returned, but only just. I held on to that small piece of paper like it mattered more than anything else I carried out of that building. And when I asked if I would see her again, her answer came with a certainty that left no room for doubt. Yes.